aka Velociraptor, so many different names. Today we'll be discussing the NAP and the implications of it. It's kind of just going to be a brief intro. Now, my personal definition of it is that it is a framework of universally accepted ethical behavior, meaning that it doesn't really, the NAP in itself doesn't say what the consequences are for violating it. It's just a basic skeleton. And beyond that, the community can decide, and the victim, of course, who has their rights violated, is the one who would ultimately decide what the punishment would be. And Sean, what was your definition of it?
Well, the generally accepted definition is the non-aggression principle is the ethical stance that it is immoral to initiate force against persons or property, the threat of force, or fraud. And that's kind of what I see as being the generally accepted definition of it. There's another definition that's a little bit more widespread than that, but that seems to be the most common one.
Right. So fraud is one of the things that's included in there. Essentially, it's anything that violates your body or your property, which is an extension of your body. Again, fraud would be a contract violation. I don't know what's the best way to explain that.
I would describe it as using deceit to gain advantage in a transaction, or using deceit in any sort of interaction between people. That would be better to put under fraud.
But that doesn't pertain to intellectual property, right? Because you can use someone else's idea and they still have that idea. You're not actually stealing from them. However, it does become a problem when, like for instance, let's say that I found out the recipe for Heinz ketchup and I wanted to sell a ketchup and say that it was Heinz, then that could be construed as fraud, and the makers of Heinz ketchup could sue me for that. But could you elaborate more on IP?
Come again? What?
Intellectual property. What is your view on that?
As far as intellectual property goes, I mean, when it's in your head, it's yours, obviously. When you disseminate that information, it's not something that is reasonably contained. I would agree with you that I would say that it's immoral if you're going to take a product that someone else created, someone else came up with a recipe for, and label it exactly the same and sell it as that product, rather than saying, okay, well, this is the same recipe and it's whatever brand name that you decide to come up with. That's immoral. But as far as being a violation of the NAP, I don't really see where that would violate the NAP. And that's kind of where I have a lot of my issues with the non-aggression.
It would be fraud in that context. Now, a lot of anarchists are against intellectual property, and to some degree I am, but I think that me personally, I think that we have to look at why are we against it. And my explanation for that is that government copyrights and patents actually hinder innovation and they stifle competition. So it makes it so that the consumer is unable to get a better product at possibly a lower cost.
Well, and
so that's really the reason behind it.
Right.
So
you
it's
see that with the drug industries, that's why the EpiPen is so expensive. It's not because the drug's expensive. It's not because it's expensive to manufacture that particular product. It's because that company is allowed a government, basically a monopoly caused by the government, because no one else can make this product so they can price it however they want. And that's the pleasure of having a monopoly, is that you can price things at, whatever you want to price it at. I mean, there's other variables at play in there, but that's the reason why monopolies are bad, and really they're caused by the intellectual property, the copyright, in the copyright laws.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I try to clarify with people, is that even though technically, I mean, we are against intellectual property, I like to make sure that they understand why. Because when you understand why, then you can realize that you should really use your own discretion. But if someone's a starving artist, like, why would you not want to at least pay them respect, pay the dues? Like, I don't believe in artists who, aren't making that much money in the first place. I'm not a huge fan of that. So I think that you do have to draw the line. Again, intellectual property doesn't really fall under the NAP very much, even though we do discuss not violating one's property. But like I said, that this doesn't actually fall under that. But I think that when we discuss it, we do have to realize that there is some gray area there. So it's really just so that we can not, like I said, stifle competition and keep the prices down for consumers, and also promote more innovation. Like you said, with the copyrights, it causes a problem with especially medications. I mean, that's serious business, That's not like, oh, somebody copied my song, which, again, like I said, I don't really agree with that, but it does get more serious when you're talking about medications and the like, definitely.
Right, and Martin Shkreli, I mean, he was well aware of that.
Yeah,
that guy's a dick.
Yeah.
But what he did was he kind of brought forward the conversation, because the only reason he is allowed to do that, was able to do that, is because he bought the patent, or he bought the rights to that product. And it takes, years to go through FDA approval on even generic products. So he knew that he would only be able to profit off of that for, 6 months to 2 years. But that was the entire goal. But yeah, all because of patents and intellectual property.
And one thing to help explain to people more so what the NAP is that it is derived, for the most part, well, it is derived from natural law, the way that you see animals behaving in nature for the most part. Not entirely, obviously, there are still some animals that rape and kill each other. I mean, dolphins, for instance, chimpanzees have wars. But you do tend to notice that there is a universally accepted behavior throughout the species, and that's something that does extend to humans, and something that we need to recognize, and we can build upon that, which is why I say it's derived from it. But I think we take it maybe a step further, and we also talk about property, even though, again, you see that in animals as well.
Right. When it comes to animals, or when it comes to any species of animal, anything that's living, if a species kills more of its own kind, or it hinders the development of its own kind, that species fails to exist. So, it's instinctive for people to, not hurt other people, because if we kill too many people, obviously we're going to go extinct. I mean, if we kill more than we produce, eventually over time, that's very real, and that's natural. That's not anything that you have to think about. It's not like you go to the grocery store and go on a killing spree. So, but yeah, as far as natural law goes, it especially with property as well. I mean, would you stick your hand into a dog's house while he's sleeping and expect a positive result out of that. I mean, I don't know about, what kind of
It's a
pets that
gamble.
you have, but yeah. I mean, if I startle my dog when he's in his doghouse, he gets a little pissed off. Um,
Yeah, my snakes don't really like being woken up very much. They tend to rattle at me and, do the whole S shape. One thing that I did want to cover, because this is something that, again, seems to be kind of gray area, and that is, well, two things. Coercion and something similar to that, which is, do threats violate the NAP? Now, my take on that is that I would say a threat can violate the NAP, but it really depends on the context. For instance, if somebody just verbally says a threat and their body language doesn't follow up on it, then I would keep an eye on them. I put them on my watch list, so to speak, but I have no right to physically attack them solely based on that, right? Now, if this is in person and they say, I'm going to stab you, and then they have a knife in their hand and they actually come towards me, then yeah, I absolutely have every right to defend myself. It really depends on the context, and unfortunately in those situations, it's for the most part probably going to be your word against theirs, which is where also reputation comes into play. If someone is known for habitually threatening people, or for being a violent person, or for even just literally just saying things that seem violent, or it seems like they're okay with other people committing violent acts, then if they were ever in a situation where it was their word against someone else's, and they were the person and that person said, oh, well, they attacked me, and then other people were like, oh yeah, so-and-so, they're always defending other people who, are rapists or, violent people, and they talk about a lot. So reputation really is important, I think, in this community. So yeah,
yeah,
anything to add on that?
we'll definitely have to cover that one. But
Well, I
no,
wanted to talk about threats while we're here,
yeah, I
because
mean, the
does that
threats,
violate the NAP?
man, like I said, that's such a gray area because, I mean, people throw out threats all the time, especially with the way that we're connected online. A violation of the NAP, I
Right.
mean, that's kind of pusillanimous, if you ask me. Um, but
Good word.
yeah. um,
Most people don't know where that word comes from.
it's one of my
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite words. Anyway, saying a threat is a violation of the NAP is sort of pathetic, and it kind of is why I'm pushed away from the dogmatic, holding the NAP as some dogmatic principle that everyone has to stick to. But threats, nah. Now, if there's an actual, like you said, if someone's lunging at you, that's a threat.
Right.
And obviously that requires, equal force to be returned. But yeah, like just words and saying that words hurt, no, that's not in the nature of what most of us believe.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Like I said, it has to be followed up with some sort of body language. Otherwise, depending upon what they say, I would just keep a close eye on them.
Right.
And then again, something else that we were talking about was coercion, which kind of goes along with that. And do we believe that coercion is a violation of the NAP? Again, I think that's kind of gray area. Ultimately, I would have to say yes, because if you look at the government that we have now, people are threatened, they have to pay taxes, or else it's threatened that they'll be thrown in a cage, or that ultimately they could be killed if they resist that arrest, which is coercion.
Right.
So,
And that's, okay, when we go back to the threat, it's the legitimate threat of force, which is kind of where that gray area comes in, because you can't always tell what's legitimate and what isn't. But coercion, that's demanding, that's compulsory compliance through the legitimate threat of violence. I mean that, yeah, I would say that's a pretty strong violation of the NAP, because that if you fail to pay your taxes, that eventually, if you ignore the letters, you ignore the subpoenas, that eventually someone's going to come kick down your door and take all of your shit. So yeah, I think that definitely be a violation of the non-aggression principle.
So in a free society, though, what would you say would be coercive behavior? Since obviously we wouldn't have that kind of thing. Do you think that would still be an issue?
It would be an issue in a free society, because just because a society is free doesn't mean that there isn't bad people, or it doesn't mean that there's groups of people who are willing to use the threat of violence and use the threat of force to get their way, or whatever the case be. So yeah, in a free society, it's still going to be very real. That's all hypothetical, so it's really difficult to say.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we would have certain safeguards in the community against people ganging up on other people like that.
Right.
And they would be taken down before they became too powerful.
Right.
Things like DROs, dispute resolution organizations, of course, private courts. If someone is threatening you, then you can either call your DRO, or you can just handle it yourself. Like I said, if it's a real threat, then it does violate the NAP. And then if you respond to that and you protect yourself, then you should be protected. Like I said, it really depends on, it is gray area, so you have to be careful. But technically it does, if it's a real threat like that.
Yeah, and I kind of see a lot of people holding the NAP as, like I said, very, very dogmatic. And when you hold it in that regard of saying that there are, DROs, then we kind of have to assume that everybody has to play by these rules.
Well, it would be dependent on
violence, and it's very interpretive. And at what point do we say, hey, the non-aggression principle is actually a social contract? And yeah, it's about that.
I think that the only reason, I think that the reason why it's not a social contract is solely just because the name social contract has to do with government. That's the connotation that it has. So
Right.
That's the difference. You can't call it a social contract because social contract specifically pertains to the government.
No, it specifically refers to everybody living in a geographical region. So,
well, the thing is, like I said, the NAP is derived from natural law, right?
right.
Whereas the social contract, such as we have now, that's not derived from natural law. Pay your taxes or else you go to jail and whatnot. That has nothing to do with nature. So
Right.
that's, I think, the main difference there. That is a government thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I mean, if you really look at like the definition of what the social contract is, and I'll pull it up here. Personally, I say that yes, if everyone abided by or accepted the non-aggression principle, that we would live in a very peaceful society. That things would be.
To be honest,
better for everyone.
Well, to be honest, you could have communities in which it's okay to violate it in certain contexts. Like,
Right.
for instance, this is a ridiculous example, but let's just assume that there is a community where people are really big into fighting, right? And they
Right.
just like to fight with each other. And it's like, as long as there's no punches, like, above the neck, below the waist, like whatever, it's just your bare fists, like, you can totally start a fight with anyone walking down the street, and there's just this code that everyone has within the
The
certain
Irish.
community. Like, I'm just saying, like, maybe there's a community where everyone's just really big into fighting, and they're just like, yeah, no, join this community. It's totally cool. You can just be walking down the street, start a fight with somebody. There's these rules you have to follow. If they, like Fight Club, like if they go limp, you have to stop, right? Like, it's like the Fight Club community. If they yell stop, if it's your first night in the community, you have to fight, right?
I like it. I like it.
Uh,
No, as
so I
far as
mean, like, that's an extreme example, but I'm just saying, like, there could definitely be communities in which there's certain parts of the NAP that they don't abide by, and it's just like, no, if you enter this community, like, that's just how it is, and everyone agrees to that, and it's cool, right?
here's what I have for the definition of a social contract. A social contract is an implicit agreement among the members of a society to cooperate for social benefits. I mean, that, again, that I think that obviously it's been bastardized.
But the NAP isn't really social benefits, though. It's more for the individual's well-being.
Right.
Social benefits in itself, like, that says that, I mean, it basically says taxes. It's like social benefits is much broader than just protecting people's own well-being.
Right, and they use that.
That's how I interpret it anyway.
Yeah, they use the broad definition to coerce people into complying with it. But yeah, I mean, to me, the NAP is a social contract. I mean, as it's applied, or as I see it used in a lot of the libertarian, anarchist, minarchist communities, I personally see them using it as, oh, you violated the NAP, or, oh, well, this is okay because it didn't violate the NAP. Well, that doesn't make it wrong, or that doesn't make it right. It just means that it didn't violate this one principle. I think that there's other principles that are, that would be better to follow. I think that, we were talking about, and I know that this has a
the satanic temple.
Yeah, this has a big stigma attached to it because everybody fears the Satanist, the crazy Satanist. But I'll tell you what, I mean, look at what the 7 tenets of the Satanic Temple are, and I think that the anarchist and libertarian movement would do well to take that, change the wording, or adopt something similar to it.
Well, the NAP is really simple, and that's kind of the idea behind it, is that it's supposed to be broad. It's supposed to be very simple. It's like, as long as it doesn't violate your body or your property, which is an extension of your body, then it's probably okay. Like, for the most part, I mean, it's really hard to think of anything that is morally wrong that doesn't violate someone else's body, right? Not your own body. Yeah, right. You can put whatever you want in your own body. Fuck it. But it's really hard to think of anything, that's morally wrong, or that people would consider to be morally wrong. Well, ethically wrong, I guess, is the right word. There are certain things that extend beyond that, like we were talking about, which don't necessarily violate the NAP. Like, I suppose breaking a contract technically doesn't violate the NAP. I don't know, but it's still something that we consider in that society to be wrong. I don't know.
Right.
What do you think?
I mean, the NAP is, I would say it's ambiguous.
I mean, you can still sue somebody. You still have DROs in private courts, so like I said,
right.
It's a basic framework. It's a framework. What did I say? a framework of universally accepted ethical behavior that is derived from natural law.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So, are there other things that one might consider to be? It's meant to be objective. Are there other things beyond that that people might consider to be subjectively immoral? Like, for instance, if you're a manager of an establishment and you feel like it is unethical or immoral to randomly drug test your employees, which I have actually overheard some of my managers saying before. I'm like, cool, nice. So that would be something subjective. But if someone else went and did that, I mean, that's your personal choice. You know, you can't say across the board that it's wrong necessarily, especially when you get insurance involved. That's just blurs the whole thing.
Right.
But there's going to be things that extend. There are things that people may find subjectively wrong that do extend past the NAP. But on the other end, like you're saying, things that are wrong that don't violate the NAP, right? There's not a whole lot of things that I can think of, really. I'm looking at the tenets right now, actually.
The 7 tenets. Yeah.
Right. It says one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone, which is, again, NAP.
Right. I just like it better because it's a little less ambiguous to me than the NAP.
Well, I think that.
So let me read them so people aren't so scared that we're a couple of crazy goats sacrificing Satanists.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So the 7 fundamental tenets are: one should strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. Within reason, right? Like if you're vegan, okay, you're not going to eat meat. That's fine. That's your choice, right? Blushka.
Yep. That is my choice.
The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. So really, you know, when there's an injustice, which happens, two parties will basically feud until justice is established. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. So, I mean, that sums up, you know, that really is the non-aggression principle right there. Because, you know, it's immoral or wrong to act negatively on someone else's body against their will. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego your own. That one confuses a lot of people, but it makes a lot of sense. You know, if you throw out an insult, okay, you just forgo your own feelings, and you better hope that they don't get hurt too bad. Or I mean, and even as it comes down to, like, yeah, you have
kind of like eye for an eye, right? To some degree.
In a way, it's like you have the right to act. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's what a right is. It's the ability to act without asking permission. So I mean, ultimately, that's very broad. But when you act in a way that violates someone else's space or violates someone else's property, their body, anything else, you forgo your own rights. Like, they have the right to defend themselves. That's how I perceive that one. Beliefs should conform to our best scientific understanding of the world. We should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit our beliefs. That seems pretty simple to me. Self-explanatory.
Well,
People go for
we
it.
need to wrap this up soon, but I mean, I do believe in people being able to practice whatever religion they please, and I think that kind of goes against that. As long as it doesn't hurt other people. I know in Liberate RVA, there are plenty of people who are Christian and Jewish, and that's fine as long as they don't, violently force their opinions on others, and I have no problem with that. Now, I know that a lot of anarchists are atheists, but...
And that's where that comes in play, is, the tenets always say, beliefs should, keyword should. It's not always going to happen that way. People are fallible. If we make a mistake, we should do our best to rectify it and resolve any harm that may have been caused. I mean, that's the morally right thing to do. And it's just understanding your own faults that, hey, you know what? I fuck up sometimes. I didn't mean to hurt somebody, but I did. And I need to, pay the price. The other,
well, yeah, and we do have an understanding of paying reparations, but that one is a little bit more vague. If you make a mistake, that's more vague than a violation of the NAP where there's actually a victim. You can make a mistake and there may not be a victim, right? That's what I'm understanding from this.
I mean, again, a lot of this is open to interpretation. I just find that this is less ambiguous than the NAP. And then the last one is kind of what ties it all together. It's every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. And that really ties it all together. And that's why it's a person, to me, the non-aggression principle is a personal decision. It's something that you say, okay, well, this is my moral code and I'm going to live by it. It's, it's not a law. It's not anything else. I'm going to do my best to live by this guideline of do no harm. That's how I perceive it.
Well, I don't think that it really works unless everyone agrees on it.
And that's the hard part, is because that's where it falls into being a social contract.
Again, I think that connotation ties in directly with government.
It does.
Government social contract. Yeah, the government social contract that we have now, like you were saying, it's to benefit society, which to me in itself is even saying that you have to pay for these certain things, because the NAP doesn't say that it's to benefit society. It's not. It is to prevent the individual from coming into harm.
Right.
I think it actually does have a different definition. And like I said, it's derived from natural law. So, but yeah, I think that some people can take it a little bit too seriously. You do have to consider the context of things, right?
Right.
Like I had said in a Facebook post a few weeks ago, I think it was, if a hungry child is stealing from your garden, then they need to know that that's wrong and that they shouldn't be doing that. I don't know where their parents are. Obviously, that's something you need to find out. Maybe they need food too. Why are they not teaching their child that this is wrong? There's a lot more to it than just going after them for stealing. You can't look at it like that.
Right.
First and foremost, you want to offer them help. And the amount of people who agreed with me was overwhelming, and that shows you right there that there are a lot of compassionate anarchists. I think a lot of people opposed to the movement or skeptical of the movement as being something that would be strictly adhered to regardless of the context, regardless of the situation, and that's not the case at all. Right. We're still humans. We're not robots. We're not going to penalize someone for doing something that they had to do to survive, right? That's stupid.
Right.
You're human beings with feelings. We do have emotions, believe it or not.
That's the other part with ethics, moral, the non-aggression principle, all of that stuff. It goes right out the window when it when you add it to the sinking ship theory. Because then basic human survival kicks in, and ration reason often doesn't play a part. And that's what's required of all of these things is rationality and reasonability. But I think that we covered it pretty good.
I agree. I think that was good.
Yeah.
Good game.
All
right.
Thank you very much. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Pleiadian Protege, and don't forget to never stop evolving. And we'll see you next time.